For the last 3 years, the Irish banks and the Irish economy have been undergoing detailed scrutiny, locally and internationally. But in the spring of 2011, preparations are underway for a very different type of international audit. In October this year, Ireland's human rights record is going to be examined by other countries under the United Nations Universal Periodic Review. But don't let that complicated sounding title put you off. Most people just call it the UPR. So for the first time ever, each country in the United Nations will have its human rights record examined by other member states. To highlight the local concerns, 17 different Irish NGOs, civil society organisations and trade unions came together to submit a collective report that reflects and makes recommendations on a range of local human rights issues. Leading up to this, representatives from this group travelled around the country, explaining what the UPR is and how it works. They also gathered evidence from people to feed into the final report.
It's an important element of any sort of process that it doesn't just involve people who work in this area and submitting documents, because if you're talking about human rights, the words to me like says human, so it must be about people. So if you want to find out about their human rights, you have to go to the people and ask them.
At the moment we're in the North Mall in Cork. We're holding one of our UPR public information consultation sessions here this afternoon. We already had a very successful one this morning, and this afternoon we're meeting with people connected with the Integration Centre.
So I don't know the criteria in our asylum process, because you are stuck somewhere, you don't know where to ask for help, you know, you are just there waiting.
I came with a fake name, fake identity, and they say, what? I walked, but when I said the truth, now it became a crime. So how do we fight for the human rights?
I even didn't know what it was about when I got a letter back. Why I was refusing citizenship. I didn't know until my solicitor told me.
I think there was a mixture of people who attended the meetings, which is good. A group which was probably strongly represented as asylum seekers, again, due to the fact that there's a lot of problems in the asylum system, that it leaves people in limbo for years without the possibility to integrate, really, to go to education, to work. So they wanted to voice their concern.
At these meetings, a range of issues were flagged. Many of these are actually preventable. So it's shocking that in 21st century Ireland, an issue like slopping out, for instance, in the prison system still exists at all.
Slopping out is basically where prisoners have to use toilet facilities, but they're not real toilets. They use buckets in their cells and then have to empty the contents at certain hours of the day. This, in tandem with overcrowding, is a huge human rights problem, really, because there's a lack of privacy in overcrowded conditions. If you're sharing a cell with 1 or 2 or 3 people and you have to perform toilet functions in front of them, it's obviously quite dehumanising and degrading. So that is a big factor in the Irish prison context. About 30%, 28 to 30% of Irish prisoners have to deal with this. So it's not a small issue, it affects a sizable number of prisoners.
Another area that was highlighted was with regards to sexual and reproductive rights, especially for women.
A big issue for women in Ireland is the fact that abortion is criminalised in almost all circumstances. In cases of rape or incest, there's no exception, but for every single woman, abortion is inaccessible. So even in cases of fetal abnormality, when the pregnancy poses a risk to the health of the woman, abortion is inaccessible. So in the last 30 years, about 150,000 women have travelled to the UK to access safe and legal abortion services. And at the IFPA, we see this as a huge human rights violation of women, and the UN committees have highlighted this as a specific violation of women's rights.
If many of these local Irish human rights violations have been raised on international platforms before, how have previous Irish governments responded to these past recommendations?
When it comes to sexual and reproductive rights, the Irish government does not have a very good track record, and they have taken no steps to advance women's rights in this area or to remedy the human rights violations.
Well, part of the problem is that the Irish state presents itself as a leading proponent and best-in-class adherent to human rights treaties and legislation in the world. But in fact, domestically, its record of implementation is very, very poor. From 2005, successive committees of United Nations treaties to which Ireland is a signatory have made recommendations in relation to provision of primary education, and the Irish state has pretty manifestly ignored these recommendations, not regarding them as binding on the Irish state in any way. The fundamental problem Educate Together is trying to solve in Irish education is the fact that 98% of all primary schools in Ireland are religious schools. In many areas of the country there is nothing but Catholic provision, and this is where the infringement of human rights comes into operation.
But if many of these Irish issues have been raised, what makes the UPR process different?
This idea of peer review, where it's not a human rights committee per se that's examining you, but your own peers, other states, are looking at Ireland's human rights record and they're going to ask us questions about it and highlight issues where we've been falling down. And I think from a kind of point of view of national pride, this is an interesting process because we're not going to want to look really bad in front of other countries. And also the fact that it's a 4-year cycle. Issues raised now will be firmly on a record and they'll come back in 4 years' time and ask Ireland, well, what have you done to solve this situation? What improvements have been made?
By early March, there were 84 submissions from individuals and organisations, giving evidence of human rights contraventions on a range of issues here in the country. In the build-up to the report's delivery date, staff from the Irish Council for Civil Liberties had to distill the 84 testimonies down to a 10-page document.
The tendency was to say, if it has to be 10 pages, let's make the type as small as possible to get as much information in. Unfortunately, no, we had to write in Times New Roman 12-point font, so that made our job quite difficult.
I think really right up until the end there was the negotiation continued in terms of what could be in and what couldn't be in, and why we decided to focus on certain issues or what were the strategic issues that we were aiming for.
You do have to make choices in a report like this. It was very important that we took strategic decisions in terms of what we included, what we could lobby on, what was best to go forward to the Human Rights Council in terms of action that may be taken or recommendations that may be taken in the future. And that meant working with the cross-sectoral steering group partners and also working with the people who made submissions and the people who attended the consultations in order to decide which key issues would be included and which would be excluded. And that isn't always an easy process.
What we tried to do was to give all of the issues that we identified within the 10 pages equal space, so there wasn't a hierarchy of issues. They were all as important as their neighbour.
Last Monday, the 21st of March, we submitted the report to the UN Human Rights Council.
It had to be in before 11 a.m. in the morning, so we were all in bright and early doing the final checks in the report. The process itself is actually very underwhelming. You just send an email to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and it's gone, and that's it.
Sometimes the discussion around human rights tends to centre on some of the broader ideological issues, where people might have an idea that human rights is all about torture or it's all about extraordinary rendition. But I think what we learned from this consultation is that human rights issues and the concerns that people have are everyday concerns. And I think if you look at the headings that are included in the stakeholder report, you'll see these are human rights concerns in relation to health, in relation to education, and there's quite a lot of information on housing and the experiences that people have had. Human rights concerns are very pervasive.
The civil society report is really, it's fantastic, almost like a snapshot, of all the issues, that human rights issues, cutting across all communities in Ireland.
I think there's always strength in numbers, and I think it's really powerful to see civil society coming together to support the different organisations, to say that we all stand together, that we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all looking for the state to uphold the rights of each and every one of its citizens.
This year there's a tremendous opportunity with the UPR to bring this into much higher political prominence.
I think it's important for us here in Ireland to remember that our government has signed up to these international instruments, so they have taken on board legal obligations to make sure that our rights are protected, and we have to hold them accountable for that.
The unique moment that we're in now, I think the current government, the new government, has a lot to prove, It's been saddled with an awful financial mess, but with that comes certain opportunities in terms of financial savings can be made, but also certain human rights abuses can be rectified.
This 10-page collective report is now in Geneva. In June this year, the Irish government will be submitting their own 15-page report. But the key date in all of this is the 6th of October 2011, because that's when member states from the UN will assess the Irish government in a public Q&A session about the gaps they see in human rights protection here in the country. It'll be worth tuning into the live web stream to see which local concerns the other countries focus on and what types of recommendations get made. But the biggest question is, will this new government break with tradition and return from Geneva to decisively implement these recommendations? In 4 years' time, when the Irish UPR cycle comes around again, we'll know for sure.